Szanowni Państwo, gościem, a właściwie gościnią Smak Książki.pl jest Erika Fatland, autorka tej doskonałej książki Granica. Doskonałej, aczkolwiek niepokojącej. Książka ukazała się kilka lat temu i być może szczęśliwie dla autorki i dla wydawcy stała się teraz aktualna, ale pewnie wolałaby, żeby to była tylko książka o tym, co było, a nie o tym, co jest.
What's happening is a tragedy, but actually the border of Russia, well, what we're watching now is unprecedented, but the borders of Russia it's been a very active border, and I got the idea to write this book in February 2014, and the idea came to me in a dream. I dreamt I was walking on a large map and I was walking from country to country, and then north of the red line was always the same country. So when I woke up, I decided to do what I had dreamt, to travel around the biggest country in the world to find out what does it mean to have the biggest country in the world as your neighbor. And then a few weeks after I had that dream and got that idea and decided to do that journey, Russia annexed Crimea. And a few weeks after that, war broke out in eastern Ukraine.
To jest książka o granicach, to jest książka o krajach, które graniczą z Rosją, ale siłą tej książki według mnie są relacje Eriki, która nawiązała z przypadkowo napotkanymi ludźmi, bo to jest książka zarówno o krajach, jak i o ludziach.
Yeah, it is. And that's why, it's a travel book, and that's the magic of travel books, to have these encounters, some of them planned, some of them not planned. And to me, the whole point of doing that trip was to meeting the people who actually live close to the border and to hear their stories, and also to illustrate kind of world history, world politics through the stories of ordinary people, because all big events in history, all major politics, ultimately it affects one and one person.
Erika spotykała tutaj nie tylko ludzi przypadkowych, ale też umawiała się na rozmowy z ludźmi, którzy znaczyli coś przed rozpadem Związku Radzieckiego. Jedną z takich osób jest Stanisław Szuszkiewicz, lider Białorusi po 1991 roku, i on powiedział Erice takie zdanie, a tutaj aż sobie muszę zerknąć, że Związek Radziecki nie jest historią, on ciągle żyje w głowach niektórych osób.
To me, meeting Shushkevich, that was like meeting history with a big H, because he was actually present when the Soviet Union got its death sentence in December 1991, when he invited Yeltsin and Leonid Kravchuk to his dacha in Belarus. And there these three gentlemen, without the knowledge of and Boris Yeltsin was there as well, and without the knowledge of Gorbachev, they proclaimed the death of the Soviet Union. And then when I met him in his very modest apartment in the outskirts of Minsk, I asked him, so when did you understand that the Soviet Union is history? And that was when he said that the Soviet Union is still not history, it's still alive in the head of many people. And he also said that the propaganda machinery is actively working to keep Russia as an empire. And that is what we are seeing happening today. So his words became prophetic, and sadly he died recently.
Czy w związku z obecnymi wydarzeniami na świecie, obecnymi wydarzeniami w Ukrainie, Erika w ogóle rozważa może dopisanie rozdziału, gdy ta książka będzie wznowiona, czy może ta sytuacja totalnie wywraca tę książkę do góry nogami?
I'm not sure. Before, when I used to talk about this book, I always used to remind people that as we are talking now, there is a war going on in Europe, because the war in Ukraine started 8 years ago, but somehow it became a forgotten conflict, and people kind of forgot that there was a war going on. And of course now I don't need to remind anyone that there is a war going on in Europe, and what is happening is absolutely tragic. What I would like to do one day is to kind of write the opposite book, not Russia from the outside, but Russia from the inside, because I do think that it is very important to understand what's going on inside of Russia. And Russia is a very, very big country with many, many different nationalities and ethnic groups from within. Russia is a lot more than Vladimir Putin and Moscow and St. Petersburg. But at the moment, I think it would be very, very difficult to do research for such a book. But hopefully, in the near future, it would be possible.
Ciekawą historią jest to, czy są miejsca, do których Erika chciała się dostać, ale jej się to nie udało.
Yes, South Ossetia was actually the only place that was off limit. I could not go there because to go to South Ossetia, you cannot enter it from Georgia itself, even if it is technically Georgian territory. You have to enter it from Russia, and even then it's quite complicated to get a visa to go there. But I did manage to do the interview that I was very determined to do with Datu Vanishvili. And for me, Datu Vanishvili, he's the symbol of what it means having Russia as your neighbor. And Datu Vanishvili is Georgian. He's lived in Georgia all his life in the same village. And then one day, about 10 years ago, he woke up and suddenly the border fence of South Ossetia was surrounding his house, and he was no longer living in Georgia, he was living in South Ossetia. And so we talked about the Russian border and how it's moving, and in the South Ossetian border has been moving a lot since the war with Georgia in 2008. So during the night, the Russian border guards are moving that border fence 100 meters here, 50 meters there. So South Ossetia is slowly expanding. And then one day it had expanded past the house of Datu Vanishvili. And his situation was desperate because, unlike his neighbors, he could not move because his wife was very ill. She could not leave the house. So he was trapped in this breakaway republic of the Kremlin. And also to meet him was very complicated because the Russians are guarding that border that doesn't really exist with cameras. So if you go close to that border, you risk being arrested for illegally trespassing an illegal border. So to go there, I needed to be guarded by armed Georgian soldiers, and they told me you have 10 minutes, then we have to leave. And then I did this very stressful interview with this poor old man with this border fence between us. And he died sadly last year, and he was an old man, 88 years old, but maybe he could have lived longer because the Russian border guards, they denied him to seek health care on the Georgian side. So he sadly died as a Georgian hero.
W jednej ze swoich poprzednich książek Erika powiedziała, że już nigdy nie wróci do Kazachstanu, a jednak okazało się, że wróciła.
I wrote that I didn't want to go back to Kazakhstan because of the 5 countries that I visited in Central Asia when I was writing Sovietistan. Kazakhstan was kind of the most boring country. I mean, Turkmenistan has this eccentric dictatorship, and then in Tajikistan you have the beautiful mountains, and so you do in Kyrgyzstan, and in Uzbekistan you have Samarkand, you have Bukhara, you have all these historical places. So then I just felt that Kazakhstan was the most uninteresting country. But then, of course, when I got the idea to write the border, I could not trespass Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan has the longest border with Russia, and the border between Kazakhstan and Russia is the second longest border between any country in the world. So I had to go back to Kazakhstan, and I loved it because when I came to Kazakhstan, then I had been to North Korea, China and Mongolia, and to travel especially in China as a foreigner, and when you don't speak Chinese, it's very complicated. And I went to places where there were no tourists, and everyone was looking at me, staring at me, and just doing the smallest thing was complicated. And then I came to Kazakhstan, and I could understand the language, the architecture was familiar, so it's kind of felt like coming home.